Silence in the empty hallway. Late in the evening, when the school was already empty, Lisa stayed late to finish a project in the computer lab. The hallways seemed endlessly long and eerily quiet. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around. No one. Trying not to panic, she quickened her pace, heading for the exit. The footsteps sounded again, this time closer. They were not just sounds, but a heavy, measured thud like someone wearing old boots. At the corner, she stopped, holding her breath. Silence. But in the mirror of the fireproof cabinet, she noticed a silhouette. Tall, dark, with an elongated face. The creature stood motionless, looking straight at her. Lisa rushed to the exit, but the doors were locked. Behind her, a whisper sounded, hoarse and barely audible. "You're late." The light in the hallway flickered and went out. The last thing Lisa heard was the scraping of nails on the floor. Locked gym. Eric always prided himself on not being easily scared. So, when his friends challenged him to stay in the school gym overnight, he just grinned. The school was dark, but the gym seemed even darker. An old, creaky wooden staircase led up to the spectator balcony. Eric sat in the stands looking out at the empty court below. All was quiet until a ball suddenly rolled out of the shadows into the center of the hall. "Who's there?" he called out, but there was only silence in response. Eric decided to go down and take a look. He picked up the ball, but suddenly heard a soft, drawn-out sound like someone running a fingernail across the wooden floor. He turned to the balcony and his heart sank. There stood a figure, dark, tall, her face hidden in shadow, but she was looking straight at him. Suddenly, the door of the gym slammed shut. The lights went out. In the darkness, Eric heard the ball slowly rolling back, hitting the floor closer and closer. A whisper came right next to his ear. "Your game is on." Every night, Lizzie stayed after school to clean out the school library. One day, while putting away books, she noticed an old, tattered textbook labeled The Book of the Lost. It wasn't in the catalog. Curiosity got the better of her, and she opened it. On the first page was a list of names, including one of her classmates, Josh, who had gone missing several years ago. Then came other familiar names, students she had seen in photographs in the hallways, all of whom had disappeared under strange circumstances. Suddenly, the library doors slammed shut and the light went out. A quiet whisper filled the room. "You're next." Lizzie tried to run out, but the book opened on its own to the last page. Her name was written there. No one had seen Lizzie since that day. The following week, another student putting away books found the Book of the Lost in the bookcase with a new name on the first page. On the outskirts of a small American town, there was an old school that was over 100 years old. No one had studied there for a long time, but every evening you could see a flickering light in the windows of the fourth floor. They said that this was Room 404, about which there were terrible legends. Decades ago, when the school was still functioning, Mr. Calvin, a strict teacher with a gloomy reputation, taught in this room. One day, his disappearance shocked the whole town. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. After that, the students began to complain about strange sounds, creaking floors, whispers, and a cold wind, although the windows were closed. Since then, the school has been closed, but local teenagers like to test each other's courage by getting inside. One day, a group of friends decided to go there at night. Having climbed to the fourth floor, they found an old board with a chalk note. "You are late," closing the doors. The door slammed behind them, and the light went out. No one saw these teenagers again, and the light in the school windows now burns brighter. The break bell. There were always rumors about the 13th grade at the old school on the outskirts of town. Supposedly, if you stayed in school after the last bell rang and went to the attic, you would find a door with the number 13. Emma never believed in stories until one day, after school, she noticed a flickering light in the hallway. Curiosity overcame her fear, and she followed the sound. The stairs to the attic creaked under her feet, and the air became heavier. There really was a door with the number 13. Emma pushed it, and inside she found a classroom. Tables and chairs stood in neat rows, but everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. On the blackboard, in chalk, was written, "Sit down, class is starting." She turned around and saw that the chairs had begun to move on their own. Invisible figures were sitting on them, leaving a cold trail in the air. The report card on the teacher's desk opened up, and her name was on the last line. When the bell rang for recess, the door slammed shut behind her, and outside the windows, instead of a school, a dead forest spread out. The next day, her name was added to the list of missing, but every evening someone still heard the bell, coming from the empty attic. Whispers in the locker. After school, Kevin stayed late at school to get a textbook from his locker. The hallway was empty, and the fluorescent lights flickered, making a low hum. When he walked up to his locker and opened it, there was a note inside that he knew wasn't there before. "Can you hear them?" Kevin felt an unpleasant chill, but figured it was someone's stupid joke. He dropped the note and started looking for his textbook when he heard a low whisper. It was coming from the back of his locker. "Who's there?" he asked, leaning closer. The whispers grew louder, the unintelligible words merging into an ominous hum. Kevin tried to slam the door shut, but something was holding it from the inside. Suddenly, a black hand with razor-sharp fingers shot out and grabbed his wrist. He screamed, but the hallway remained empty. A hand began to pull him in, and the whispers turned into deafening laughter. The next day, the students noticed that Kevin's locker was locked. When the vice principal opened it, there was nothing inside except a note. "Now I can hear them all the time." At Graceville High School, there was a music room on the 3rd floor that had long since been closed. They said that every Friday night you could hear the piano from there, although there was no piano in the classroom. Emily, a new student, decided to check it out. After classes, she stayed at the school, waited for silence, and went to the room. The door was slightly open. When she entered, she froze. In the corner stood an old piano, covered in dust. She came closer, and suddenly the keys began to move on their own. An eerie, out-of-tune melody began to sound. Emily wanted to run away, but the door slammed shut. On the wall in front of her appeared the inscription, "Play with us." Her hands reached for the keys on their own. When she was found in the morning, she was sitting in front of an invisible piano, silently moving her fingers. Emily never spoke again, only played that damned melody.
Which story did you like the most?